Welcome everyone to the 2021 ACTC conference and to this plenary session. Very excited to see everyone here this morning and to prepare to hear the good word from Andy Delbanco and Melinda Zook on the work they're doing in Cortex. And it's it's also my pleasure to hand things over to, I'm Charlie Thomas, sorry, Executive Director of ACTC. And it's my pleasure to hand things over this morning to a member of ACTC's Board of Directors and member of the core faculty at Columbia University, my friend Roosevelt Montas. Thanks for doing this, Roosevelt, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you everyone for being here. It's a distinction for me to be able to introduce our plenary speakers today. Andrew Delbanco and Melinda Zook, both of whom I count as friends and fellow at arms in many initiatives to advance things that all of us here believe in. I could go on for a long time just listing the accomplishments of these two individuals, and that would be before I got to the praises of these two individuals. I will dispense with some of that to allow greater space for our discussion. Andrew Delbanco is the Alexander Hamilton Professor of American Studies at Columbia University. As he said recently, when he was introducing me in a different context, it would be embarrassing for both of us if I detailed just how far back we go and just how many bumps and bruises we have encountered together and overcome together. But Professor Delbanco is one of the most powerful voices in the contemporary scene, arguing and working on behalf of liberal arts education. He is not only a scholar of American literature and culture, and his books are many and important, but he is also a doer. And both at Columbia and most recently as president of the Teagle Foundation, he has put his back and his extraordinary skill and ability into supporting and nourishing programs that advance the study of liberal arts around important texts, around foundational texts, both in colleges and for high school students through initiatives at the Teagle Foundation. It is his work at the Teagle Foundation that brought him into partnership with Melinda Zook, who is a professor of history at Purdue University and the director of the Cornerstone Integrated Liberal Arts program there. Professor Zook specializes in political and cultural history in early modern England. She is the author of many books and articles that are well worth your time. But in 2017, she, like Andy, took her commitments into and turned them into action. And with the College of Liberal Arts at Purdue, developed a Cornerstone certificate program that was initially conceived as an outreach to STEM students to introduce them to serious, sustained, text-based study of liberal education. The program has been a tremendous success, and in 2020, the National Endowment for the Humanities partnered with the Teagle Foundation to launch a national program modeled on the Purdue Cornerstone program to revitalize liberal education around the study of transformational texts in many schools throughout the country. The program has already yielded very significant initiatives, and its goal of revitalizing liberal education at the undergraduate level is visibly coming to fruition. So they will tell us more about that today. I assure you that you're in for a treat, both for the intellectual content, but also for the inspiration that their words are certain to give us. So Andrew Delbanco, Melinda Zook, thank you so much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Roosevelt. You did succeed in embarrassing me, and I don't embarrass that easily, so we'll deal with that later on. Part of the reason I'm embarrassed is that I I'm the reason we're running 5 minutes late here. I was both chronologically and technologically challenged this morning, but we overcame that, and thank you for your patience. And just so I've got things clearer than I did before, Charlie, we've got till 10:30 in this session, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, good. So in the interest of time, and so that we can get to discussion, I'm not going to launch into an extended oration here. I do want to start with what has become sort of ritualistic greeting these days, is to say, I wish we were together in person. I had a great time last time I was at one of the ACTC meetings in the Southwest. And I hope it won't be too long before we're able to resume seeing each other in actuality. Now, my impression is that in large measure, Melinda and I are going to be preaching to the choir this morning. That is to say, it would be unnecessary and inappropriate for us to spend time trying to convince this group of the value of reading and teaching enduring books, core texts, great books, classic texts, whatever, or transformative texts, which is the vocabulary that Melinda and her colleagues use at Purdue. You all know about that, so I don't need to bother you with pronouncements about why that matters. I think instead, it would be useful to talk about how one might persuade skeptical or pessimistic or disengaged colleagues, including administrators who are, after all, often former faculty, that teaching core texts may offer a way out of the slough of despond in which the academic humanities currently find themselves. And I don't think there's much debate about the condition of the humanities today. Now, we all know in rough outline, though I'm sure we will disagree about features of the story, but in the rough outline, I think we can all agree about how we got here, which is a story that's usually, and I think largely justifiably, told as a story of declension and disintegration, though there are other aspects to it. So about 100 years ago, colleges began to open up, often reluctantly, to new students from different backgrounds than had been the case with the exclusively male and usually relatively secure students who went to college in this country. Now colleges were beginning to engage with students who came out of secondary school without anything even remotely approaching classical training. At the same time, the values of the research university, specialization, and a broadly positivistic conception of knowledge that was borrowed from the sciences, began to take hold even in institutions where research was not a primary function, in liberal arts colleges, for example. Under these new circumstances, the old prescribed curricula gave way to a proliferating array of electives. The rationale for this change was that this kind of education, or I think what increasingly might be better called this kind of training, was what students needed in a society where work was increasingly specialized. The classic description of the specialized modern work environment is to be found in Max Weber, as I'm sure you all know. Now, this rationale was welcomed by faculty who could now teach what they wanted to teach, on the pretext that what they knew about was also what students needed to know about. Sometimes that can be true, but often it's not true. Like any narrative of historical development, this wasn't a linear process, and there were lots of forms of pushback and variations on the theme. And some institutions moved more quickly and others more slowly in the direction that I'm describing. Are you hearing me okay still? All right, okay. One of the forms that pushback took was in the form of programs such as our beloved core curriculum at Columbia, of which Roosevelt was the director for many years, which has somehow or other managed to survive for about 100 years, mostly because the alumni love it so much, so that whenever there is, whenever it seems to be coming into trouble, either from faculty or from students or from some combination of the two, alumni show up at the office of the president and they say something like, you know, Mr. President, I read in the school newspaper that the core curriculum is in trouble, and for some odd reason, ever since I read that article, I can't find my checkbook. So let me know when the core is back on track and everything is okay, and then I have a feeling I know where I might find it. And that's some variation on that story, takes place every decade or so. And so far, it always has a happy ending. The Columbia core curriculum came into existence immediately following the First World War. And it has evolved in ways that Roosevelt could talk to us about if you're interested since then, of course. But it was an explicit and intentional response to what was perceived as the crisis of Western democracy, and an explicit effort to engage new students, in Columbia's case, a large influx of Jewish students who soon became too many in the eyes of administrators, so they instituted a Jewish quota, which didn't last very long. But to introduce these new students to what they thought of as the Western tradition with its implicit democratic implications. A similar story, very different in some ways, took place at Harvard following the next World War, the Second World War, which gave rise to the general education program there, articulated in what became known as the Red Book. And St. John's College had not a birth, but a rebirth in the 1930s, right in between those two wars, in the midst of the Depression. I don't know as much about that story as I do about the Columbia and Harvard stories, but my impression is that it was also a response to crisis conditions and a commitment to what was understood to be education for democracy. All of these efforts at a kind of restoration, though not, I think, a backward-looking sort of reform, were undertaken to ensure that students would have some shared experience in their college years, which were increasingly fragmented, increasingly dominated by centrifugal forces. Some shared experience in confronting enduring questions about what makes a meaningful life, reflecting on those questions and debating them with peers who were reading some, if not all, of the same books, and complicating their own view of the world by engaging with the views of other students. The language of the Harvard Red Book, I'll quote you just one phrase from it: "This kind of general education reform was required by, quote, a centrifugal culture in extreme need of unifying forces." A centrifugal culture in extreme need of unifying forces. That doesn't mean, to my reading, didn't mean and doesn't mean we want to go back to a monochromatic culture or a culture without difference or a culture without diversity. It means that we need some unifying forces in a culture that has those other attributes. And I think we could probably all agree that 65 years after that report was written, the need is more urgent than ever. Okay, I also don't need to tell you that for roughly the last 50 years, these centrifugal forces have succeeded in penetrating and in many cases overwhelming the academy itself, with the result that curricula outside the major, and sometimes for that matter inside the major, have become almost entirely incoherent. That is, general education curricula. They generally follow, I haven't done a survey to see what percentage of colleges and universities do this, but the vast majority follow a distribution model, which was described by the late, great sociologist Daniel Bell in a report to the faculty of Columbia College 60 years ago. He called distribution requirements, quote, an admission of intellectual defeat. That is evidence that the faculty could no longer agree on anything that students should read in common. I mean, we have, as you know, we have sometimes these common first year readings that students are asked to do before they get to college, but that's about the extent of it at most institutions. Now, this is a complicated history, much more complicated than the way I've just sketched it out. You're all thinking about what I'm leaving out and what I put in that I shouldn't have put in. And I don't mean to tell it as a story of virtue versus vice, but however you think about it, there were large forces at work, internal and external to the academy, that made resistance largely futile. And I want to acknowledge, just before I leave this narrative mode that may have gotten tiresome already, that there's a lot of fear that came into the academy in these years, and a lot of intellectual adventure that came into the academy in these years. This is not a story of being engulfed by darkness, but it is a story of incoherence, I think. Now, be that as it may, it seems to me that we now find ourselves in strikingly new conditions. Let's just talk a little bit briefly about the internal conditions of the academy. The long brewing employment crisis for the humanities, for young humanist scholars, is, I think, leading to a recognition that narrowly conceived scholarship, or more recently, arcane theory, just no longer cuts it as a ticket to an academic career in the humanities. The humanities departments, already shrinking, will shrivel and be discarded unless humanists find a way to engage with students early in their college years, before they choose their specialization, their major, through a general education curriculum that is exciting, inclusive, rewarding, and even, we hope, joyous, that give our increasingly heterogeneous students something to share with each other and something to take with them into their professional post-college lives, or just into their lives after college. Everything I've just said really, in my mind, amounts to a kind of drum roll for introducing Melinda, who will be too modest to say that she, with, of course, a lot of help from colleagues and institutional leadership at Purdue, has invented a new model for general education that is committed to core texts, though I'm sure we'll have debate and disagreement about what qualifies as a core text, and that is in the process of transforming a great research university, largely devoted to technology and related fields, into a genuine learning community for undergraduate students. That's the bottom line for me. And when I first heard Melinda speak about this about 4 years ago or so, I was just blown away by the clarity and simplicity of the model that she and her colleagues have developed. And ever since then, we at the Teagle Foundation have been working on an effort to bring this model to the awareness of leadership and faculty and trustees, for that matter, at other institutions, in the hope that we can spread the Cornerstone gospel. And as Roosevelt mentioned, we now have a partnership with the National Endowment for the Humanities in our effort to do that. So I'm going to stop there, ask Melinda to speak to you about whatever she wants. I didn't mean to tell her what to say. And then we'd be happy to have a discussion, which I hope will lead to some practical ideas about how to help this project along. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Roosevelt. Everybody can hear me okay? Are we good? Okay, thank you. I have been so looking forward to this opportunity. Of course, there's the privilege of being side by side, so to speak, with Andy and Roosevelt. Andy's been so generous and kind and done so much to spotlight, produce a Cornerstone program. But I also feel like this group, above all the institutions and organizations that I've talked to so far, will really understand. You will understand just how strongly I feel about the power of core texts and their potential to empower and enrich our students. I know you know this, but we in the liberal arts really have a mission to save the liberal arts, yes, and in doing so, save ourselves, save our nation and our future, and create an open and inclusive society, both equitable and innovative. And two, higher education should also provide some sense of future economic security, cultivating in our young people, from the computer scientist to the biochemist, the core skills that are the hallmarks of a liberal education. That is, of course, the ability to communicate, to think creatively, analyze information, adapt to change and multicultural settings, to tolerate ambiguity and nuance. These are the core skills that are still in demand, in fact, in higher demand today by industry. And they are some of the few skills that machines cannot replicate. Now, my friends, if you talk to students about skill sets, they immediately tune you out. They actually want something else from us, and something that we have in abundance: inspiration, wonder, beauty, and transcendence too. Because although they may not be able to articulate it, students want to be moved, changed, have their eyes opened, be made anew, to be inspired. That's what college is for. And it's what core texts, what you call core texts and what I call transformative texts, do to a T: enrich, enchant, change lives. And along the way, teaching them also teaches those fundamental skills: reading, writing, speaking, and relating to others. After all, technique without content is utterly empty and doomed to fail. Every time there's another survey of employers, the American Association for Colleges and Universities did one recently, and it was reported last week in Inside Higher Ed. The top resume traits that mattered most to employers, from business to technology to healthcare, are those imparted by a traditional liberal arts education: teamwork, clear writing, problem-solving aptitude, strong oral communication skills. And as we all know here, there is no profession, from management to nursing, that does not demand that we be able to relate ideas and information to other human beings, solve problems based on the ability to procreate and analyze data, and make ethical decisions. Now, we in the liberal arts understand this basic reality, and honestly, so do our STEM brothers and sisters. But parents, not so much. Politicians and the media, not at all. And trying to convince the public that a major in French literature is better than a degree in pharmacy is something like a fool's errand. Considering the cost of higher education, it is understandable that parents would want a return on their investment and at some point a spare bedroom. So how can we best serve our students? Prepare them for the world beyond as employees who can adapt to changing times, as self-governing citizens of a democracy, and as centered adults with an understanding of themselves and the world around them. I think we can safely assume that our gen ed programs are not enough. A little of this, a little of that, stir it up, what do you get? not much usually. Today, I'm going to suggest that the key to our survival may well lie in a deliberate menu of courses that will impart the learning and skills needed by pre-professionals, and along the way, enrich and nourish our students' mental world. At Purdue, the Cornerstone program was implemented to provide our undergraduates, particularly in the STEM degree programs, with a broader, more robust education and to remedy the steep decline in liberal arts enrollments. Cornerstone is now in its 4th year, and all indicators suggest that we're solving those problems. But the program has been such a success that we solved other problems, including some we didn't know existed. Now, what I'm going to do today is just tell you our story, and I'll be brief. But it goes like this. Purdue is the nation's 3rd largest STEM university. But when I arrived in the 1990s, no one ever described it that way. You were just part of a Research One university, and scholarship was the measurement of your worth. You certainly never worried about enrollments, and no one ever talked about teaching. It was just something you did between swishing off to conferences in the archives. Life was good. But starting in 2010, something changed. No one ever told you what was happening, but you could see it for yourself. You were used to walking into your large history survey course, expecting about 200 smiling faces, and suddenly it was 50. Woe be it to you if you were teaching an upper level course, history of the civil rights or German literature. It used to attract 15 to 20 students, and now you had 5 or none at all. My history of England class, which usually net around 40 students, was fortunate enough to get 15 the last time I taught it in 2016, but only because I renamed it The Real Game of Thrones. That's right, I sold my soul, because we thought that marketing our courses better was the trick. To steal liberal arts majors from other departments by offering sexy sounding courses. The English department will offer dragons, and we in history would counter with pirates, a Hobbesian war of all against all. Now, for several years, I was like a voice crying in the wilderness. My colleagues, those with their heads above the sound, also understood that nagging sense of angst, but there was no leadership, and there was nothing we could do. We just saw things get worse. In fact, I now know how desperate our situation was becoming. Between 2011 and 2015, Purdue's College of Liberal Arts declined by around 2,000 majors. That's half its pre-2011 number. That meant that small departments like philosophy were absolutely devastated. Philosophy with 18 faculty members had a mere 22 majors in 2015, but larger departments like my own, history, with 30 faculty members, normally boasting around 200 majors, dropped to 99 in 2016. The social sciences and interdisciplinary programs saw their numbers cut in half. But most stinging was the sheer sense of demoralization. You would walk into half-empty classrooms, and every semester you would see large numbers of classes canceled. And by the way, this was especially true in the languages. They were completely demolished. Now, this state of affairs meant a lot more than simply not being able to justify new faculty lines or other resources. More disturbing than our losses as a college was the loss of a truly holistic education for Purdue students across the campus. In 2016, for example, among all Purdue students, only 10% graduated having taken a course in literature. A mere 7% attended a class in American history. Hard to imagine that we were cultivating well-rounded graduates under such circumstances. Now, I've come to the mountaintop, and I know now that we'll probably never get all those majors back. Our job now is to better educate all those STEM students and to provide them with the kind of well-rounded college experience they deserve, and through our new gateway sequence, bring them into our advanced liberal arts courses and perhaps inspire them to double major with a liberal arts degree program or a liberal arts minor. So how do we reach all those STEM students? How do we integrate liberal arts learning into their degree programs, providing all undergraduates with a comprehensive education that advances communication skills, broadens perspectives, and imbues students with an inspiration, the sheer joy that comes from such wonders as history, philosophy, literature, and to art, music, and theater. Starting in 2016, the College of Liberal Arts, with the new dean at the helm, developed a series of initiatives to attract students from across the campus. The most ambitious of which was Cornerstone Integrated Liberal Arts. Cornerstone is a 15-hour certificate program and outreach program to STEM and management students. Now we're going to go to a PowerPoint here. Cornerstone's approach is twofold. First, it offers a new first-year sequence that fulfills undergraduate gen ed requirements. And second, it offers a liberal arts certificate that goes on students' transcripts and that students can complete by simply taking 3 more advanced liberal arts courses in the themes of the Cornerstone program. Now, the program was designed by faculty, myself, along with colleagues in history, classics, philosophy, political science, and English. We developed an alternative general ed sequence for first-year students that would act as a gateway. This chronological sequence, Transformative Texts 1 and 2, is centered on reading and discussing foundational texts, great literature from around the world, from Gilgamesh and Plato to Langston Hughes and Toni Morrison. It also fulfills the students' requirements in written and oral communication, which all Purdue students have to complete. In short, what we created was an alternative to the obligatory skills-centered English comp and introductory speech courses primarily taught at Purdue by graduate students. In designing transformative text, we deliberately set out to create a course that all liberal arts faculty would want to teach. This would be a course that would do more than reinforce skills. It would enrich the lives of our students and inspire them with a love of learning and all its related virtues: empathy, flexibility, perspective, inspiration. We also wanted these classes to emphasize mentorship, giving first-year students across the campus a mentorship experience with a full-time faculty member, someone who could guide them, foster their talents and interests, and continue to be a resource throughout their college career and beyond. And I cannot stress enough how much young people, especially first-year students, need an adult in their lives, one who is on campus, one who understands the stress and difficulties of college life. And to this end, we hold workshops for the Cornerstone faculty, instructing them on the various resources on campus and how to handle students in crisis. And this training has come in handy more than once. Now, our first goal, creating a course that all our liberal arts colleagues would want to teach, revolved around the question, what could we all teach? For the vast majority, the answer was simple: core texts. Foundational texts are the one common denominator among all liberal arts faculty, and usually the reason we joined the Academy in the first place, to share our passion for ideas. We began teaching faculty to teach written and oral communication basics, while they prepared to teach what they loved most, whether Sappho or Aphra Behn, Primo Levi, or Cormac McCarthy. Both transformative text courses give faculty plenty of latitude. They can create the course they've always wanted to teach, so long as they continually reinforce our students' reading, writing, and presenting skills. Faculty choose from novels, poetry, short stories, drama, famous speeches, and works of nonfiction, usually around a theme such as utopia, dystopia, the quest for a meaningful life, travel, the perils and promise of artificial intelligence. Now, making such a class fun and exciting for both instructors and students was not difficult. Transformative text is all active learning. Cornerstone faculty use both older methods of pedagogy and new ways, such as the Socratic method and recitation, as well as various new transformational learning approaches. On a day-to-day basis, the class is about grappling with great questions that arise from the text. We do a lot of close reading, because critical reading is also a skill that many students lack. And we integrate activities such as small group work, debates, poetry reading, TED-style talks, Shark Tank pitches, and pre-pandemic evening film fests with pizza. You'd be surprised how much pizza they can eat. Prior to the pandemic, Cornerstone faculty took their students to theatrical performances, concerts, galleries, and museums. We received funding from our president's office to do this. Faculty also invited in guest speakers. And we've done a lot more of that since the outset of the pandemic, since physically taking our students anywhere this year was impossible. So faculty have Zoomed in guest speakers, usually authors. We have taken them on virtual tours of galleries and used online live performances. We've had a great deal of success with Cornerstone-wide contests. Last fall, for example, we asked for essays on the pandemic that students would write. This spring, we asked for artwork and poetry on the topic of the book. These contests give students greater opportunity to be creative and win prizes for doing so. And the contests were so wonderful, the entries that they sent in were so wonderful that we recently e-published our own Cornerstone review of student work completed in transformative text. This contains essays, short story, poetry, video, and artwork. In fact, we just learned that the alumni office has sent out print copies of the Cornerstone review to interested alumni and potential donors. Now, the point of all this is very simple. In transformative text, students hone their communication skills, learn to read critically and how to listen to one another. And they learn about ideas and history and the human saga, and that questions about life and love and suffering and friendship and forgiveness are all worthy of discussion. And faculty also benefit. Pivoting the faculty from their departmental courses to courses for undergraduates across the campus gives them access to students they might never have taught otherwise. It allows them to attract these students into their other courses or inspire students to double major or minor in their field. These courses recruit students. After all, undergraduates who encounter an inspiring or caring faculty member at the outset of their college career are more likely to continue taking classes with that instructor. In short, our goal is to place our faculty from the distinguished full professor to the incoming assistant professor in front of first-year students to mentor these young people, foster in them a love of learning and an appreciation of ideas, historical context, and diversity. Now, students in transformative text are encouraged to complete the Cornerstone certificate by enrolling in 3 more advanced liberal arts courses. And these courses are arranged in 5 fields, and you can see those on the PowerPoint: science and technology, environment and sustainability, healthcare, medicine, management and organization, conflict resolution, and justice. Now, we designed the themes to attract STEM students, allowing them to see their discipline, whether environmental engineering or astrophysics, through a wider lens. For example, there are courses here in communicating in the global workplace and US environmental history. There's a sociology course in industry and society, a philosophy course in biomedical ethics, courses on the Constitution, criminal justice, and civil rights. Cornerstone encourages students to gain another competency, be it in environmentalism or management. But the most concrete benefit for all undergraduates who complete the certificate comes from developing their analytical and creative thinking skills, along with the ability to read critically, write with clarity, and speak with confidence through 15 hours of liberal arts coursework. Now, the Cornerstone program is in its 4th year. In our trial year, when we weren't sure what we were doing, we just offered a handful of sections. That was 2017-18, and we had about 160 students. From there, we scaled up rapidly. And this year, as you can see, 2020-21, we offered a total of 143 sections of transformative text, 76 in the fall, 67 this spring, to 4,241 students. In fact, we now know that we're scaling up again in the fall 2021, and we're going to offer 92 sections of transformative text. So most of the students in the transformative text sections are in engineering, technology, management, and the sciences. Not all of them will complete the certificate. We know that. We probably couldn't accommodate them if they did, to be honest. But the fact that most of them are in STEM brings me great joy, to be honest, because I know that even if they never take another liberal arts course, at least they've had a full year of reading and discussing texts like the Odyssey and To the Lighthouse, the speeches of Frederick Douglass, and the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks. Now, as some of you know, and it's been mentioned now a couple times, in 2020, the NEH and the Teagle Foundation announced a partnership to revitalize the role of humanities in general education and college campuses across the country based on the Cornerstone model. And if you're interested in creating such a program, I want you to keep in mind that the gateway courses are the key to your success. It is through that gateway sequence that students from across your campus will learn about your marvelous liberal arts faculty, from your linguist to your art historian. And your faculty will be given the opportunity to teach students from biology to physics and bring them into their other classes and inspire them to continue on in their discipline. At Purdue, what Cornerstone has done is re-energize the 70 faculty that are now participating in the program. Teaching transformative texts allows the faculty to leave the confines of their discipline and create a course based on the readings that inspire them and the activities that they create. Such a program can bring your faculty together. We hold workshops pre-pandemic. Those always came with a meal, whether they were lunch or breakfast. We hold wine and cheese receptions, again, pre-pandemic. And although this year we were forced to meet in a virtual world, we share a common mission. And we're part of a program that has made, that has given the liberal arts a real impact on our campus. We've become a player again at Purdue. So Cornerstone offers the faculty community and camaraderie. And now just let me take one moment to discuss the outreach to the rest of the campus. In the earliest stages of creating this program, I was particularly interested in reaching the STEM colleges. And in the very beginning, when I wasn't even sure what I was doing, to be honest, I would go to the STEM colleges and I would talk to administrators and faculties. And the question I would always ask is, what can we in the liberal arts do for your students? How can we better educate them? And their responses always revolved around their students' lack of communication skills and interpersonal skills. But they also wanted their students to take their gen ed requirements in some kind of meaningful trajectory. And so this is how Cornerstone became the program that would both bolster communication skills and give students a purposeful pathway by which they could complete their gen ed requirements. Now, I still talk to my STEM partners regularly, but now that the program is up and running, I collaborate a lot more with our performing arts, cultural centers, galleries, and libraries. They can offer my transformative text students enriching experiences, and I can offer them access to hundreds of students. Everybody wins. So for example, this spring, Purdue Theater is producing Brecht's Mother Courage and Her Children and offering Cornerstone students discounted tickets. The performance will be live streamed, of course. Nearly 800 students in transformative text are reading the play and they're going to be able to see it. And Purdue Theater is so thrilled, so much so that they've decided that every year from now on, they're going to produce 4 plays that are based on our list of transformative texts. Now, alumni relations and development are also happy about Cornerstone. We've given them something to talk about. And in fact, recently we just received a big donation earmarked for Cornerstone by a Purdue engineer. So we have ongoing projects with the library. They wanted to get in on the act. So they gave us space, something that is very hard to get at Purdue University. They gave us a room and we are outfitting it as the Cornerstone reading room. This will be a book-lined space for our students to read and study, and a space for us to bring our students to, because we found out that they didn't know where the library was and that they never used it. So this will increase foot traffic to the library, and we can hold receptions and book talks there. They're also putting together a free library of transformative text, an e-library of transformative text for our students. Now, let me finish off by saying that, as you can imagine, building such a large program that has changed the way Purdue delivers oral and written communication, basically since World War II, was a grand undertaking. And admittedly, it was challenging. Every degree program, and there are hundreds of them across the campus, had to be changed. So there were plenty of sleepless nights, but it was worth it. And we in the liberal arts have really turned the corner. We were drowning and we're saved. Our number of majors are up, our minors are through the roof, and we're hiring again this fall. But what really matters to me is the impact that the program is having on students. Students across the campus talk about transformative as their fun course. That's their word. They talk about it as a break from the stress of their days and as a comfort zone. It's their homeroom. And they get its importance. They understand that these courses are about their pre-professional development. And they understand too that these courses are about their individual souls, about their whole human being, about them as searching and suffering and longing and loving human beings, trying to navigate this desperately confusing world. Pre-pandemic, a colleague of mine in sociology, she was teaching transformative text, and she asked me to come and meet her students. So I did. And when the class was over, one of them came up to me, a computer scientist major. And he said to me, the reason I love this course is because I'm a human, not just a technician. And this course brings out my humanity. So let me end by saying this. What we're doing is something that's truly radical, but in its soul, it's actually deeply traditional. Close readings of foundational texts. But in today's world, it's innovative, bringing the humanities back to the heart of every student's program, from chemistry to criminal justice. It's radical too, because you're taking all those highly specialized faculty out of their departments and you're placing them in front of first-year students in core humanities courses. But the times demanded radical action. And the last thing I'll say goes back to what Andy was saying. There was a time, we all know this, when the liberal arts, and particularly the humanities, were at the very heart of the university, and no university could imagine existing without them. To be college educated meant to be liberally, broadly educated. We in the humanities need to regain that ground that we once owned. We need to be the center again. We need to be, need I say, the cornerstone of liberal arts education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melinda and Andy. This is a remarkable presentation and inspiring in a dozen different ways. And happily, we have some time to talk. At the bottom of your screen, everyone, either under participants or reactions, you'll find a raise hand option. Because I can't fit all of you on my screen and see you physically waving, it would be very helpful to me if you used the raise hand function there. I see you, Bridget, so you'll be first. And then I will, I'll work through the queue, and we will stay in conversation as long as we can until about 10:30. If you are asking a question, we would ask that you turn your camera on. It's just nicer to see the person asking the question. And if you're not asking or answering a question, it's helpful for you to be muted so we don't end up with feedback issues. So Bridget, you're up.
Thank you. And I'll try to be brief, and I put this in the chat as well. I think I saw a video at one point at Purdue of the Dean of Engineering talking about the Cornerstone program and how great it was. And I just wanted to ask what kind of support or early on you had from non-liberal arts administrators. So maybe provost, somebody in academic affairs, deans of non-liberal arts colleges.
Well, that's an excellent question, actually. We had support in words. So in the very beginning, it was our president, Mitch Daniels, who was talking a lot about the students couldn't read, the students couldn't write, they weren't taking any humanities courses, they needed to take history courses. They knew it. But it wasn't until we got the new Dean Reingold in 2016, that he started putting money into it. And I was charged in 2016 with the new program. We had no idea. We just called it Integrated Liberal Arts. And then the college started putting money into it. And then in 2017, I reached out to Teagle because I knew I needed more money. So they were all for it. But did the STEM colleges want to fund it? No, but yes. We heard something very funny yesterday. One of the students in a class said that they had heard that we were developed because astronauts couldn't read and write, which is very hilarious because Purdue is the, what do they call it? The cradle of astronauts. This is one of our slogans, right? So that's why it was developed. But you know how students think. But anyway, yes. But they do talk about it a lot.
But Melinda, if I could just interject, since then, since the program has developed momentum, I mean, you do have support from the deans outside of liberal arts in the form of encouraging their students.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Right.
In encouraging their students, absolutely. We are the preferred option. And in fact, I should have said this. Above all, the College of Technology, we are required for their students. They are required to do the entire certificate, which that meant a huge amount of students. I think they get 900 about 1,000 new students every fall. And in fact, the demand is such that we can't actually fulfill it. That's why we keep scaling up. And it's why we're hiring.
Stuart Patterson.
Hi, thank you. That was quite inspiring. I'm asking from a position of a small Great Books program in a much smaller campus than you occupy, but with probably a gen ed program that rivals yours in complexity, or at least the one that you had before, the Cornerstone program. I'm wondering about the negotiations with a broad group of highly specialized faculty, and whether there was any jealousy of the core text model among specialists and resistance to that idea that they were going to have to give up their professional identities to teach these courses and possibly lose their sort of distinct standing among their disciplines. I wonder if that presented itself as a challenge at all.
Well, let me clarify. First of all, Cornerstone is just a core within the core. Okay. The Gen Ed core, which is much larger,
yeah,
I think it's over 30 hours, still exists. What we do is try to give them a avenue through it that makes sense, right? And we can never, Cornerstone can't complete it because we have no math requirement, right? So we're just liberal arts, and they have to take a science course, they have to take a math course. That's beyond our expertise. About the other question, faculty, I think for the most part have been very generous, and many of them jumped on board immediately. They don't have to give up anything really, and they were given a stipend to join and prepare to teach, first by the college and then with the help of Teagle. And I think a lot of them say that what it's done for them is help them teach their other courses as well, because there is no place on our campus to talk about teaching. And what we've done is we offer these workshops, 3 or 4 a semester. Usually they're called How I Teach This Text. And a faculty member comes in, and maybe they're going to talk about how they teach Antigone or the speeches of Frederick Douglass. And I provide lunch, so they're not missing anything. And they talk about this, and it's usually a joyful experience. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and we steal from each other. We plagiarize, and I've become a better teacher too. I've learned how to be much more active in the classroom with them. Having them do a lot more small group work, and also relate the text to STEM degree programs. That's not always, actually, it's easier than I thought. So for example, I often have them do, take a text like the Inferno and make a design for a video game out of it. They love doing it. It's quite easy, but they also have to know the text. So the point is that the faculty have been on board. There have been a little bit of grumbling about disciplinary identity, but I don't care because interdisciplinarity is the way to go.
Melinda, again, if I could just briefly interject, because this question of the relationship of Cornerstone to the existing Gen Ed structure. When I tell your story, Melinda, and you have an opportunity here to correct me, I have this image of you on a hot August morning, trudging over to the general education office and saying something like, hey, everybody has a written communication requirement and an oral communication requirement. That's built in, and I suspect that's true of a lot of other institutions. If I bring you a real faculty member and we have a class with 30 or fewer students in it, and they read real books, core texts, will you give them credit for this requirement through that class? That's my understanding of one of your initiating questions. And my version of the narrative is that they said, sure, why not? Probably because they thought they'd never see you again, right? And then you want to go back to the English department and say, hi, colleagues, you may have noticed you don't have any students in your classes. How would you like to come over to Gen Ed and teach this course? So that's my version of it. It's probably wrong in some ways, but I tell the story because the point being, Cornerstone didn't create a new general education structure. It met an existing set of requirements, but it met them with a much more substantive, meaningful, and genuinely transformative course than had previously existed. Is that at all fair?
It is fair, and the fact is, and this may not be true for many of you, but at large public institutions, graduate students do written communication and oral communication. It's really not fair, I think, to put such a vulnerable community in with the most vulnerable community, which is first-year students. You're taking people who are still learning how to teach and putting them in with people who are still learning how to learn. What I decided is you put seasoned faculty members in with those first-year students. And, of course, at first we were small in number and no one was paying too much attention, right? We're growing now, and we're the other options still exist. I'm not saying they're gone, but we are the most favored option among the STEM degree programs.
Scott Lee. You're muted, Scott.
Melinda and Andy, a question for both of you, please. First off, Melinda, congratulations on a terrific narrative, which is the right narrative to get things done like this. It's really, really well done. Andy, congratulations on taking this through the Teagle Foundation and with NEH to spread it around the country. Super in both ways. My question is, how important and that are largely humanities courses are attached in some way, shape, or form to performance or to artistic endeavors. How important to the entire conception of this program is it? And that's directed at you, Melinda. And then Andy, do you see this scaling up as you and NEH, this aspect of the program scaling up as you and NEH transform general education throughout the United States?
Well, I guess I'll go first and then okay. So I'm so glad you hit on that because I'm so proud of that part of the program. We really do emphasize having them having the faculty students out of their comfort zones and taking them to the theater, the cinema, the opera house, galleries, museums. Most of these students have never gone to any of these kinds of things. Their first question is, what should I wear? Right? They don't know how to buy tickets. They don't know anything. So this was very important. Now we're using a lot of Purdue performing arts and galleries and museums, but we've also have the money to take them to, we're between Indianapolis and Chicago. So that's what we can do. Take them to Indianapolis and we can take them to Chicago. And the president has funded this. I think these kinds of enriching experiences are extremely important for first-year students. Maybe they'll learn to love plays, right? Maybe they'll learn to love the theater or an artwork. And they're not going to get that anywhere else. I mean, this is the time.
Can I push this your answer just a little bit further? Can you comment on the art shows and on the essays and the rewards and the contests?
Oh, well, that was kind of an accident. We just had funding from a STEM unit that said, well, I see you're highlighting Frankenstein this year, and the novel Frankenstein kind of goes nicely with AI. We'll give you money to do a contest and give students prizes on a short story on AI. And they said, fine. And then we got the most wonderful short stories, and all these students submitted. I had no idea that they would do it, right? So we started doing it every semester, and they often, of their own accord, would start submitting artwork and poetry. And sometimes it's not even because the faculty member said, you know, sometimes they'll say, we'll give you extra credit or we'll make it a part of the assignments. Sometimes that wasn't even there, they just heard about it, right? These are all students in transformative text. So that led us to thinking, wow, this stuff is so good that we should put together a review, right? And you know, the review, I send that to the STEM units so they can see what their students are doing, right? So they can see that their students are more than a biologist or a future astronaut. I send that to the students themselves so they can give it to their parents. And then we found out that the alumni office wanted it, and so forth and so on. So it snowballed.
I'll just say very quickly, I mean, it's a great question, Scott. Thank you for it. And it has actually provoked me to think about some stuff in a different way. Melinda has told you the important part of the answer, and my position is to pay attention to whatever Melinda and her colleagues at Purdue are doing and to try to encourage others to do the same. So the short answer to your question is yes, we would like to see the reinvigoration of the creative arts and the engagement by students with, as Melinda said, theater and art galleries in a way that they hadn't had before. And my understanding, Melinda, is that the theater on the Purdue campus is feeling great about Cornerstone, and they're getting a new audience as a result of Cornerstone. And I would only just add, and this goes, I don't know if we want to spend time on the usually not that productive question of what qualifies as a core text. But my understanding is that it is within the bounds of permissibility to identify a movie as a core text, for example. And film is one art form with which students are generally quite familiar. They've all gone to the movies, even if they haven't gone to the theater. So that's one way to open up the Cornerstone classroom to the kinds of artistic experiences that might feel a little less alien at first to the students who enroll.
Thank you.
Paige.
Thank you. I'm very interested in what folks are saying. I wondered at Purdue, is there any spillover with honors education and the Cornerstone program?
Do an honors section of transformative text last year, the sequence in the fall and the spring, and we did do that. I think that they're a little protective and have not done more outreach to me. So they're watching it with interest. Let's put it that. Not more than that.
The reason I bring it up is that at Norfolk State, where I was the honors dean, we were the folks, Honors College offered all the, going to the theater, the opera, the films, we did that kind of enrichment for almost the whole campus, besides, paying to take our own kids to those events. And so I very much believe in that kind of enrichment. And it sounds wonderful. And I'm very impressed by your program in every way. Again, we're always looking for allies in these great causes. So, I would just say, think of the honors programs and honors colleges as a way in, perhaps, to some other universities, which I know Andy probably knows that very well from the Teagle Foundation as well. The problem is elitism. That's the dark shadow of honors education, but it doesn't have to be that. And honors can be a resource for an entire campus. In our case, a historically Black college, University of Norfolk State. And we've found great partners in the community with the arts art outreach in our program. So thank you.
Dan.
What a great success story. I'm immersed in narratives of failures, so that was a real shot in the arm. My understanding is that the first year of Cornerstone, though, is not a common course, that faculty are teaching their individual courses. And I'm wondering whether you even considered having a common syllabus, at least in the first year. I ask because my own program has had that forever, but indeed we've failed, and we just cannot agree anymore on a common syllabus, and the whole thing looks like it may unravel. So I'm not actually suggesting it, but I'm curious as to whether you had discussions along those lines.
I knew that the faculty would never agree to that. I knew it from the get-go. And what I was able to do is put together a list of a little over 200 authors that we would agree that at least 50% of the texts that you used would come from that list. And that gives them still plenty of latitude. And that much I could do. But also I'm dealing with a very diverse group of faculty. So I've got people in languages, I've got people in musicology, I've got people in anthropology. So there was no way I was going to get them to use some common texts. There are texts that are very popular among a lot of the sections. Frederick Douglass, 1984, Handmaid's Tale. Odyssey is probably the #1 text that's used. But they're all they pick what they love and what they love to teach. And I think that if they pick what they love to teach, they'll be successful at teaching it. It was hard enough to get that list, by the way.
200.
Jay.
Thank you for a really exciting presenting of a very exciting project. My question is about composition. And it comes out of we have a writing intensive core curriculum course that I teach in that is called Narratives of the Self. And just the other day, I got a message from a former student who is in a graduate program and is trying to get credit for English Comp 1 and 2, and I had to send our syllabi. And so my question is, I see, and I teach at a small liberal arts college, so it's not the question of these courses being taught by graduate students, but I wondered if you could respond to what about courses being taught by the seasoned writing specialist, the people that go to 4 Cs. I've been on the executive committee of the South Atlantic MLA SAMLA, and I think one of the things that, one of the accomplishments during the period been on the board was incorporating those people into our association. But I must say, with my background of being a literary scholar, I feel comfortable with this group. I feel comfortable when I go to 19th century French studies. I go to their sessions and I learn a lot. I apply some of what I learned, but it feels like a different world for me. Are there people on the call who go to 4 Cs? Do you have something to say about my concerns or experience?
We work with everybody. We work with Purdue's Writing Lab. We work with a lot with the literature faculty. They're much more on board, I would say, than the rhetoric and comp faculty. The rhetoric and comp faculty do not teach the first year English comp course. And that's a huge difference, right? They were teaching the graduate students to teach that course. And it still exists, it's still running. There are some upper level composition courses that are like writing for business, but I'm not even sure those are taught by faculty. So I don't know more than that. I'm sorry.
Well, the queue is open and we have about 9 minutes left in the session. So if anyone else would like to get in on the conversation, now is the time.
Can I say something that will confirm to any of you who are wondering how weird I am? This will confirm that I'm a little weird. Melinda mentioned the Odyssey, so it makes me think of Stanley Kubrick's, I've got Kubrick on the mind for various reasons, great film 2001, A Space Odyssey. And when I listened to Melinda describe the Cornerstone program, I remember a scene in that movie when this American scientist is flying across the surface of the moon to inspect this discovery that they've made of this clearly intelligently made artifact that has been discovered on the lunar surface. And he's flying across the surface, and the guys who've discovered are rolling out some maps, and they say to him something like, you know, at first we thought it was an outcrop of magnetic rock, and we thought it was a natural phenomenon, but now we've come to the conclusion that it was deliberately buried more than 1 million years ago. And his response to them, I was just like, he looks at them, he says, deliberately buried. He said, you boys have really come up with something, haven't you? And that's my response to the Cornerstone program. And maybe it's not quite as astonishing as finding an extraterrestrial artifact that's been left millions of years ago. But this is an amazing accomplishment, and we really are hopeful that others will pick up the mantle and do something similar. And of course, there will be variations on the theme, and every institution has a different gen ed structure. But any institution that can do something close to Cornerstone will have been doing something that's really worth marveling at. So that incoherent comment is my last comment for the day.
No, it's clear that that Melinda and company have, they're really onto something. I think we all can share that sense. But perhaps okay. One last question and then we'll close it down. Stuart, please.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just picking up on that, is there a place to go to look at initiatives that have been started elsewhere based on Cornerstone?
Well, we have a ever evolving Cornerstone page on the Teagle website,
Okay.
which will be more populous in about 6 weeks from now than it is right now, because we have a number of grant proposals in front of us from a wide variety of institutions that at least some of which will be funded after our May board meeting. So by late May, early June, if you come to the Teagle website, and honestly, I don't know what NEH is doing about this, but I assume something similar, you'll be able to see the grants we've been making to a variety of institutions, and we're working on making that an informative website so you can see variations on the theme. But thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I'm happy to share, by the way. If you email me, I'll, any of you email me, I'm happy to share syllabi or whatever it is you'd like to see.
Thank you.
Well, perhaps this is a good time for us to take another moment to thank Andy and Melinda for this presentation and for their remarkable work, the work they're doing to revitalize the core and the humanities and undergraduate education is work that benefits us all. And we're very, very, very appreciative of all the good things that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for having us.
And thanks everyone for coming. We've got a lot of conference left and I hope you explore the agenda. I will mention one thing in the next session. We will be, ACTC will be hosting a live podcast recording. The New Thinkery guys are going to do their podcast on our site. So Rousseau's Discourse, Old Books, New Media. It should be pretty exciting. And I think there's going to be a pretty big audience. So if you want to see the intersection of another innovative way of approaching the core, I recommend that session at 10:45. But thanks again, Melinda and Andy, and thanks again for everybody who came.
Thank you.
Bye.